Aeril. Through sickness and health, war and peace, justice and injustice, all men are doomed to meet gem-cheek Sortira, the eternal guide and holder of scythe and chain and bowl. Songbirds are sacred to her, and dogs bark at the sound of her approach, for by her guiding hand, their masters are led down to Grandfather Dios' twilight halls. Beautiful and eternally young, it is hoped that in her embrace all may find peace. From Euphemia the Sages, the Book of Numen and Munin, Book 2, Chapter 14. Like spirits of the dead, the wind whispered to Aeril as he rode past, a single phrase on their lips. A daughter she will be, a bearer of your curse. Aeril tried to shake the sounds from his mind, but only heard the rustle of cedar, oak, and cypress. He looked ahead to his fellow riders, the boy who had become a lord, the friend who had become a prince, and the man who called himself neither. And what of me? Aeril wondered. Who am I to become? The question had first come as Aeril had carried himself down to the kitchen for an early breakfast. He'd stopped before the entrance, peering around the corner to find Amnia already up to her elbows in dough, kneading the second batch of the day's bread. I know you're there, Aeril, Amnia said without looking up from her work. 5 years, but you still walk as you always have, like you're balancing a beast on your shoulder. An early morning's greeting to you, too, Aeril entered. Have you seen Brother Preston? That feather-headed coot, Amnia cackled. He'll be down any moment. What's the matter? Had another one of your dreams? Aeril sat himself at the large bench used for serving the castle's attendants. Something like that. Boo. Amnia finished shaping another loaf and walked over to the nearby stove. A minute later, Aeril had in front of him a slab of bread and a wooden bowl filled with barley and onion broth, with a splash of vinegar on top. Before he could take a bite of either, Brother Preston barged in. Amnia, he whined, I demand bread and water! In truth, Preston was no man's brother, the term merely designating his rank in the Rook's august order. Old enough to be Aeril's grandfather, Preston was a short, plain-looking man whose rheumy eyes made him seem like he was perpetually suffering from spring sneeze fever. Get your own bread and water, Amnia yelled back, nevertheless pulling out a tray carrying both. Aeril, praised be the yellow heron. Brother Preston sniffled. I thought you would still be abed, especially after so long a journey. But it hasn't been 5 years. Don't tell me you've abandoned your robe. One thing at a time. Aeril couldn't help but smile. I returned to pay my respects to Lady Shoshana's shade. Trismegistus Austanes permitted me 40 days, and if I leave on the morrow, there will be time to finish my initiation. And I'm sure Lucian is up already. Preston raised an eyebrow, something brewing in his watery eyes. Prone to conspiracy, once Brother Preston took hold of an idea, he clung to it like a shipwrecked sailor their driftwood. Most curious, he finally said. Aeril shrugged. Yes, but are such things not uncommon? I would say not. Just so, Aeril nodded. Preston, I was actually wondering if you could answer some questions of mine. Brother Preston took a seat next to Aeril, a hand on his bronze medallion. What sort? Whatever sort you might expect, Aeril replied. After breakfast. Preston nodded. After breakfast. When they were walking through a quieter part of the castle, Aeril began again. Have there been any recent descents into the chasm of the crypt? He asked. Preston raised an eyebrow. How recent? Since I departed south, Aeril replied. If not that, in living memory. Brother Preston ran a thumb across his lips. In the past 5 years? He sniffled. No, the past century. Not sure. I'm a better healer than a historian. Did you have another dream about them last night? The first in months, Aeril confessed. Unlike the others. No falling, no collapsing floors either. I was walking, further down than ever before. Only... What? The pair turned and entered the cloister overlooking the training yard. Only it wasn't myself. Aeril let the truth finally come out. I was someone else. Someone not entirely unfamiliar. Preston. Yes, child? How well can dreams tell the future? The future? Preston thought for a moment. Well, that depends. To dream of things past is quite easy, as most dreams are little more than dialogues between us and our innermost selves. But the future? It seems only the gods might do that. either through seeing all things or knowing the future as something already past. But regardless, they prefer portents in air, water, or flesh, not dreams. Why do you ask? In the dream, Aeril looked over his shoulder. I was to have a daughter, but I don't. Not yet, at least. And the person who told me, I thought they were the Lord of Blackbirds. I don't know. What was my grandfather like, Preston? Preston raised his other eyebrow. Which? My namesake, Sir Aeril Argent, the one who died when I was 5. Ah, Sir Aeril the Charcoal-Handed. The name brought a smile to Preston's pouty lips. Curious man. A Sibyl's scion. Mayhaps that's where your dream came from. Or does my memory fail me and in fact was his wife? Either way, the story goes it was one of them. Story? Aeril paused. I thought you knew him. That I did, Preston admitted, though I myself only started calling this castle home in the year of your parents' union. Yes, he was a curious man, your grandfather, a knight, and a heroic one, but there is always some deep sadness about him, a yearning for the far places of the earth. You are his grandson, without a doubt, unless the gods play us. I see. Aeril nodded. Were there any other curious things about him? Not that I can recall. Preston rubbed his eyes. He was very close with your father, and his own, but that was before my time. Coming from such humble origins, he was eternally grateful to have his line joined to the ancient Maruli. Preston paused a moment, some thought creeping behind his rheumy eyes. You haven't had any episodes recently? Preston asked. Have you, Aeril? Aeril shook his head. Not for the better part of 10 years. I thought you said they were behind me. And yet your nightmares, Preston urged. Few, Aeril insisted, especially these past 5 years. And your grandfather, Preston went on, didn't he too share in that same illness? No, you once said that was one of his own parents. Which one? His father, I think? Aeril strained to remember the details. And your grandfather, Preston went on, did he ever? Aeril stopped and turned to Preston. I thought I was asking you the questions. Preston sighed. You're right. I forget myself. The silence between them was interrupted by the passion of steel on steel. In the yard below was Lucian, dressed in training leathers and sparring against Sir Miles Vered as Edmund, Eggenhand, and a couple of the household guard looked on. A man past his prime, Sir Miles Vered was nevertheless a sight to behold. With a frame like cut marble, Sir Miles was strong as a bear and twice as fierce, even if his handlebar moustache and short-cut hair had already long since gone to grey. As for Eggenhand, at the very sight of him Aeril became aware of a slight, throbbing pain behind his eyes. The fight seemed in Lucian's favour. While Sir Miles wielded his large greatsword with precise brutality, Lucian made up for his inexperience with sheer speed. Again and again he darted around Sir Miles, checking him on the shoulder or waist, only to be met by the master-at-arms' sword. You think he fights well? Preston asked. Not well enough, Aeril admitted. He expends himself too much while Sir Miles remains still. Preston fingered his medallion. I admit he might do better if he spent as much time practicing the blade as he does trying to rule. Aeril turned to Preston. Does he rule well, though? Preston sniffled. As well as he can, I fear. Though he has yet to be tested in the way all great rulers are. Aeril thought of the rain, of the long harsh winters where the sun showed his face left off the knot, of the doom-swept seas, of the dust and the dry earth, the rivers sluggishly slithering beneath the summer sun, starved of their precious snow-melt. That test may yet come, Aeril replied. What preparations have been made for the drought? Few preparations can be made, Preston admitted grimly. Brother Simon from Tel Siveth says near Sirkaya has been hit even harder than Erdonia. The images came back to Aeril, grim-faced commoners in the fields and rivers, determined to gain now what they would lack later. So I remember. Preston nodded. Should famine come, I hope the White Hills game is plentiful indeed, for otherwise we may be soon eating our own tables. As they continued to watch, a thought came to Aeril. What do you make of him? Eggenhand? Preston's eyes narrowed. He's up to something. The Emperor's third prince shows up unannounced to the castle of a clan who, by nearly all accounts, should be completely beneath his consideration. Not only that, he is shadowed by a councillor of the Red Gold, yet a councillor whose position is entirely redundant. Out of all the members of the Red Gold, only he has no name or lineage. We don't even know if this Egenhand is a lord, let alone if that's even his real name. Preston gave Aeril a sideways glance. I'd have it that he's the scion of some disgraced clan, shamed by legacy as much as deed. Perhaps he's even a Vix, the last one remaining after Tygon Otho had the entire line wiped out. That seems a bit much, Aeril replied. Did you hear what he asked me? Preston nodded. I wouldn't. What about Lucian? Aeril asked. Egenhand came to recruit me, just as Edmund came to recruit Lucian to investigate the— Investigate what? Aeril bit his tongue. It's odd, don't you think, that those two arrived mere hours after me, one in fact seeking me, as if knowing I'd be here. There's a snare, though. What? Aeril's eyes narrowed. Before he could respond, though, a shout rang out from below. Lucian had knocked Sir Miles onto his back and now pressed the blade to the older man's throat. Miles' greatsword lay off to the side in the sandy earth. Lucian bent down towards Sir Miles. Do you yield? Instead of words, Sir Miles kicked Lucian's legs out from under him. As Lucian fell, Miles sprung up and pulled the concealed dagger from his boot. In a moment, Lucian was now the one on his back, sharp steel threatening his neck. Cheater! Lucian exclaimed. I had you! That you did. Sir Miles helped Lucian to his feet. But you'd expect I was playing fair. Shouldn't a knight always play fair? Lucian insisted. Only the dead are deceived by that illusion, Miles snorted. Next time, pay as much attention to your own movements as mine, and finish the fight instead of gloating and throwing your balance off. Miles slapped Lucian on the back with a grin. Lucian grinned too, if only with his mouth. Well fought regardless, Preston mused as he and Aeril entered the yard. Another few years of training and I'm sure you'll win the laurel at the next athletic games. Lucian frowned. Says the horse about the hawk's wings. He turned to where the prince and his courtier were sitting. What do you think, Edmund? The prince shrugged. Better than I could have. I've always preferred to ride and shoot the bow, even if one might call it a coward's weapon. He then jumped up. How about it then? You and I, just like the old times. Riding through Aaron's Wood to the southeast, shooting game, not a care in the world. Aaron's Wood? Are you sure? I would remind you, Highness. Like a shade, Egenhand was at once at Edmund's side. That as your designs, I have mine, and they do not allow you to ride alone. Edmund frowned. Fine. And so, Egenhand turned to Aeril, a faint smile on his lips. Why not have your lordship follow too? If you truly intend to depart, why not ride with us this final day? The pain behind Aeril's eyes made it difficult to speak. Are you sure? Shouldn't he be resting? The prince glared at his courtier. I'd best be resting too if I need to make it back to Fair Calais in half of 40 days. What, you think I'm some kind of invalid? Aeril snapped, his pain boiling into rage. I could have ridden here in 10 and 7 days if I tried, while it took you double that, and I could have done it in even less if I needed to. Egenhand chuckled. How perceptive, Aeril. You'd stay vigilant too, Aeril shot back, if while traveling near Sirkaya you discovered 100 lictorials and the unease they left in their wake. As we speak, your retinue remains at Flotton on the crossings, awaiting your return. You are good, Egenhand mused. Someone with your eyes would doubtless be of help on the hunt in the woods of Erin. I'll allow it, Lucian smiled. It'll be good to have you. Marcus, he turned to one of the nearby household guard. Could you tell Eli to ready 4 horses? The member of the household guard, a bearded man of about 40, put a gloved fist over his heart. My lord? Half an hour later, Edmund, followed by Lucian, Aeril, and Egenhand were riding through Erin's woods, bows on their backs and quivers against their saddles. Beneath the canopy of pines and oaks, the forest air was pleasantly cool, a world removed from that outside. A soft breeze blows, words of worry. A daughter she will be, a bearer of your curse. Hey, Lucian. Aeril rode up to his brother. Yes, Aeril? Lucian replied. Aeril looked over his shoulder, spying Egenhand a good ways behind. Whatever happened to Martinez? He asked with a low voice. The farmer? Lucian's gaze remains fixed on the path. I did as I had ought. I left him in his cell overnight with only a dove for company. When I came back this morning, much to my delight, I found it unharmed. And Martinez? He confessed everything, Lucian replied. The fire was his, revenge against the man he believed fathered his cousins. While normally for this a hand is customary, if not more, I decided on leniency. I said he was free to go, but must return on the 4th day to receive lashes in proportion to his crime. Aeril's eyes narrowed. And if he delays? Lucian glanced back at Aeril. Then he'll be declared an outlaw and hunted down for the dog he is. The lash fades. but its dread persists. Aeril laughed nervously. How many lashes do you plan on giving him? Lucian turned back to the path. 1. Before Aeril could respond, the forest came alive with the sound of flapping wings as hundreds and hundreds of shapes swarmed the air. Pigeons! Edmund exclaimed, thick with joy as he knocked an arrow and let it fly into the miasma of feathers and flesh. A moment later, one of the small birds rested at the feet of Edmund's horse, an arrow caught in its wings. Grinning, Edmund jumped off the horse, cupped the bird in his meaty hands, and snapped its neck with a crack. Whoever gets the most wins. Edmund turned back, grinning. Aeril and Lucian exchanged a look. As the prince decrees, Egenhand announced, so it shall be. Lucian sighed, smiled, and was off. Soon they were all riding through the woods, downing birds one after another. Archery had never come naturally to Aeril, but he threw himself into it all the same, trying to escape the thoughts on his mind. The prince, by contrast, bouncing on his stirrups, seemed as one born in the saddle. 4, 5, 6! The prince heralded his every kill. We should split up. It's hardly fair with me hogging all the room up front. The three turned. Egenhand, having yet to draw his bow, gave a nod of assent. At once Aeril peeled off from the main column, letting the winds and his steed take him where they would. Several minutes and shafts later, and Aeril had only managed to down 2 despite the fog of feathers flying above. He readies another arrow, but as he does, one sound replaces another beneath the flapping of wings. Someone was singing, their mournful notes like flakes of snow on the wind. Although the words elude him, the voice does not. How? The word cut through the air. That can't be. Wheeling his horse about, Aeril raced towards the voice, the birds and Edmund's game all but forgotten. Mother! Aeril called, though with each gallop the sound became fainter and fainter. Passing beneath a pair of epingloam trees, the song suddenly ceased, smoke in a stiff wind. Hello? Aeril called out into the bush. Who goes there? Silence answered him, until from the wood a voice came. Aeril. The person was right behind him, but when Aeril turned he found no one, only the silent wood. No flapping wings, no rustling on the wind. Nothing. Aeril. This time the voice was calling from farther away, soft as distant thunder. Fortuna? Aeril's cry echoed off the trees, shattering into the distance. He kicked his steed into a canter and began riding towards the voice. Fortuna! Aeril. This time the voice was only a whisper. In its wake returned the flapping of wings. Aeril turned to face the birds, but as he did he noticed something else flying silently among the pigeons. Trying to make it out, he was so focused on it that he didn't notice the shaft.